All right, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and I'm streaming with you. Not at you, not to you, but with you tonight. It is August 11th, 8/11, 7:02 here in the Central Time Zone. And this is where we get together and shoot the shit about astrology and kind of the mundane happenings of the world. And well, tonight is no different. We're back here, and we're going to be taking a look at Tim Walz and his astrology tonight. Okay, so that's going to be really the bulk of the show. We're going to also look at where we are astrologically with Mercury retrograde and a lot of these other happenings in the outer sky, in the inner sky, and yeah, I don't think we're going to have a long show tonight. I think I always say that, right? Oh, we're not gonna have a long show tonight, and then I wind up having a long show. So I don't think we're gonna have a long show tonight. Maybe about 90 minutes. Send the rest of you people out into the world on your Sunday night, and you could watch the replay of the abomination known as the Olympics closing ceremony. I have not seen it yet. I have heard the early reviews, and apparently it is as weird and dystopic and ritualistic as the opener. Of course it would be. It has to be. The same guy is doing it, right? And they've invested all this time, effort, and money to get in there and turn the screws in your brain. So they're not going to back off at any point or anytime soon. I did, this is a very interesting thing that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. And I'm not sure I'm going to bust it out tonight. And I'm not even sure I want to let the cat out of the bag. But there have been two movies that have been on my brain for the last couple of weeks. And I'm not going to say what the movies are. But one of the movies has to do with the boxer from Algeria that was in the Olympics. I'm just going to leave it there, and I'm going to find a time this week, maybe on a 15 minutes show, to get into it, because there are ideas here that I have to flesh out that are kind of mind-boggling, but I have to flesh them out first before I go there. So I don't really want to say anything about it, but I just did. So I guess that's called a tease. Hey, listen, I want to talk about True Hemp Science, and then I'm going to get into chat. I'm going to see who's here. So let me run the banner, because of course we'd like to run the banner. There we go. And Chris sent over a sample, a partial sample of the goodie bag. So when you spend $100 or more at True Hemp Science, what you're going to get is you're going to get your product, and then you're going to get the goodie bag. This is not the complete goodie bag, but this is part of the goodie bag. So this is an eyedropper of dose. So you would try this right before you go to bed, and you follow the directions. The directions are on the back right there. So you would try this before you go to bed and see if it works for you, right? So you would get like one of these in the goodie bag. And then, you would get a pack of 2 gummies of Starlight. Now, I'm telling you right now, this little pack is close to the value of the purchase of whatever you get from Chris, right? So I'm just telling you this, and then you get this again, this little dose. You get some other stuff as well. You'll be happy you got it. You'll be happy you used the discount code. Trust me. So $150 or more gets you free shipping, and there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. That's truehempscience.com, and all you got to do is type in 15MINS, 15MINS, and you will get the goodies in the goodie bag. All right, let's see who is in the house here tonight. We have right at the top of the food chain, of course, it's DJMC, Mr. Michael Cisternino. What's going on, Michael? Good to see you, brother. PB's here. Hi, PB. Gucci to Goats. Jake in the house. What's happening, Jake? Good to see you. Misbehaving too. Good evening, Robert. Chat. Hey, we're having a good weekend out here. In Texas has become hellish again, weather-wise. We had a brief reprieve there for about 3 or 4 weeks, rain off and on, some big dumps. Well, we're back. We're back into sub-Saharan South African temperatures here. Not anything like you guys in Nevada, but it's hot. Sweet Woodruff, speaking of Texas, she's in the house. Oh, and formerly of the area that I'm living in, Ingram, well, close to Ingram. Jackie Delario, the Empress of South Jersey, she's here. Paula Bizak, what up, Paula? Good to see you. Padrita Pebbles, DJ Pebbles is going to be at our event on the first weekend of April. I'm sorry, October 3rd, 4th, and 5th. I guess it's a good time to talk about the event. We're going to have Mario from Symbolic Studies. He's going to be with us and giving us a presentation. I'll be doing a presentation. It's always Human Design Sunday with Darlena. She'll be there. We got DJ Pebbles spinning. I'm trying to get another. I'm thinking about bringing another person in. Not because you won't have enough to do, but this guy's he's pretty interesting. And he's going to be on the show on Friday. So I'm not going to say anything more about that. But if he's into coming to the event, if he's here and available and he will come to the event, then there's even a chance that we might be able to do a little bit of a, whoops. You know what happens when my face freezes and I begin to look like a bulldog? That means I have to do a forced quit and be right back here. So don't go away. Google Chrome does its normal thing. I'll be right back. And it's that easy. Okay, let me just get rid of the banner. There we go. So, yeah, maybe an offsite. We shall see. We shall see. Do I have this here? Hold on. Get rid of that. Maybe that'll be better. Hopefully. So yeah, come join us. Come hang out with us in the Hill Country first weekend of October. There's a link that's inside the show notes that will take you to the sign up page over at Square, and all the information is listed there. It tells you what you're going to get, how much it's going to cost. And then if you're interested in getting a room, I suggest you call the Inn of the Hills. That number is listed on the link for the Square page. And the thing about getting a room at the hotel is that you don't have to pay for it. So for whatever reason, if you can't go or can't make it, all you got to do is call them up and there's no charge, right? So that gives you some flexibility in terms of that. And if you are interested in coming and the room is a challenge, there are people that have shared rooms, you can reach out to Tom in chat right here. And he's also over on Locals, and he's also over on Telegram. So you can work with Tom, and he can maybe hook you up with another person. We've done this before, and it works out. It works out fine. We only had one assault, and that was easily solved. The person was paid off, and there wasn't any real damage done to the room or anything. And of course, we were able to talk to the cops, and they were fine with it. So yeah, just a minor thing. No, I'm just kidding. Nothing like that has ever happened. Everybody plays nice. All right. Whoa, no, not yet. No, I don't want that. No, no. All right, who else do we have here? 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 Who else is in the house? Who else is in the house? Susie G's here. The Queen of Hearts. Scott Ian. Scott Ian. Scott Ian. Scott A. Cash of the Masha should be moving around and doing while I listen. You, Casha, you mash it up. Let's see. Thor at the door. Who caught the closing story? Watcher worship on full display. Then death closed by singing, I did it my way. Watcher worship. We're in Chris Knowles territory there. Jennifer Mola in the house. What's happening, Jennifer? There's Claire. Hi, Claire. Integrity and karma. Integrity and karma. Peter Bio, my relationship seems to be in the astrological toilet lately. It's exhausting and tedious. Well, that's what happens when you get caught up in those Virgo squares, right? Yeah, man. And a Mercury retrograde. Yep. I hear you. Artist Sear is here. Hi, Artist Sear. Stephen, the Jupiterian. I have the Olympic Games on TiVo. There you go. TiVo. Wow. That's a recording device. That's old school. Rich J, Driftless in the house. What up, Rich J? Bo's here, Kabuki Theater. We are not men. We are Diva. I choose the events I've recorded. That's good. Give you some control over the media. We got Mark S. We got a Mark S sighting. Just talk with Mark S. He and his new book. I saw that Children of Men one you said. I watched 20 minutes, had to turn off. Depressing, but seems accurate. The only difference between Children of Men and current England is they flipped the script. In Children of Men, it's the Fugees who are in these refugee camps, right? In current day England, it certainly feels like it's trending in the other direction. So but a lot of the elements are still there. Neo the Wise is here. Brandy Herrera is here. Terry is here. The Gold Guys, Prometheus, i.e. Rockefeller Center coming out of the rock. There you go. Let's see. Yes, if you're interested in this astrological reading, there you go. You can get it through me, with me. I always enjoy doing them. In fact, I love doing them. Melissa Stanton, Never Ending Stories been on my mind lately. Good evening to you, Melissa. Checking in from Florida. I started to think about the Boxer Rebellion. Yeah, the old Boxer Rebellion. Good old days. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Chris is a great guy. Let's put that right up there, Terry. That's our man from True Hemp Science. Chris is such a good guy. Yes. Let's see. Pedrita says, very challenging energy this last week, but survived the shit show. Feel drained as fuck. Hope you guys had a great weekend. I get the drained feeling. Definitely. Let's see who else we have here. Neo the Wise says, I don't mind missing the stage shows these days. Who knows with what magic they're programming the audience. I have opted out. I have opted out of the spectacle. And so I'm of two minds with this, right? Because everybody is breaking it down. Let's break it down. Let's break it down. Break it down, man. Let's find the secret. Let's find the secret behind the ritual. It's a ritual. And the ritual is going to tell us what they're going to do to us. I'm like, at a certain point, I'm fucking over the rituals. Right. And then, I'm not really consenting to give my attention and participation to the ritual. Even if I spend time going, oh, there's this, there's this. I mean, I did the opening ceremonies only because astrologically Algol was involved, and I've got this thing for the French Revolution, right? And it just seemed all very timely. And I didn't go hog wild on it, but I did break it down a little bit. But by and large, I'm not into it. I'm just not into it. It's like and I know it feels like a bit of a cop out, but it almost feels like when you watch, you are to some degree, right? You are a co-conspirator with that experience. Now, you could use your discernment, and I've done it for years. You break the shit down and you dispel the spell, and that's fine, right? But it just feels like a new pastime or something. And how many more can we do, or do we need to do? Just random thoughts bouncing around my brain. Cynthia Cluth was there. So this is a really good point. Hey, all, and meow. Either Walz is indoctrinated from birth via Nazi ties, or stupidly compromised, doing bad things, and threatened to shut up or else. Okay, so here's what I think. After giving it some thought, talking to some other people, and this is something that Mark S. were kicking around, and I were kicking around before the show. I think Tim Walz was abused as a kid. Right. I think he was abused, and abuse is intergenerational. So when you have somebody who's abused and then they wind up abusing other people over the course of their life, you have to go back to the roots of it, right? Because I think that's what's going on with Tim Walz. And then I had this conversation with Mark. It's like, okay, I could go there and I can kind of get in touch with my humanity because this guy is fucking damaged goods, right? But on the other hand, he's damaged goods. And I don't think he should be in a position where whatever level of abuse was heaped upon him should be heaped upon us. Right. I don't think by looking the other way and holding space for him is going to really change the outcome. He shouldn't even be there in the first place. So I was reading before tonight's show started. I was reading about this guy, Thomas Eagleton, who was a vice presidential candidate of George McGovern. And it was thought that Ted Kennedy was going to be the vice presidential candidate with McGovern. And they thought, okay, we'll get a Kennedy in here. It's 1972, by the way. And this is after Chappaquiddick. So Chappaquiddick kind of cooked Teddy's goose a little bit. So this is after Chappaquiddick, but they think, okay, we can get him in as a vice presidential candidate. He's not going to be president. But if you're George McGovern, do you really want Ted Kennedy as your vice president? Knowing that perhaps there are people inside that party that really want Ted Kennedy to be president? Do you really want him as vice president? No. So the Democrats were losing votes to the Catholics. The Catholics were moving away from the Democratic Party. And a lot of it had to do with Roe v. Wade and abortion. And Eagleton was a Catholic and he was anti-abortion. So McGovern said, hey, man, this guy's good, right? I think we could really use him. He's going to bring us the Catholic vote. And, we're not all going to be, pro, we'll have somebody that's going to be, pro-life amongst our ranks. And then a couple of days later, somebody called McGovern and said, have you checked into his medical records? And he was like, no. Well, you probably should. So Eagleton, this is minor, by the way. Eagleton had suffered from depression, had some alcohol issues, and he had been hospitalized 3 times. Okay, 3 times. 18 days later, he's stepping down. Why? Well, it's because he was going to be a detriment to McGovern's campaign. Like, he had baggage. And he's like, I can't do it. The party means more, the presidency means more. I'm out. I'm tapped out. compared to Tim Walz, like being hospitalized for depression, well, shit, that's run of the mill now, right? I mean, now people would just say, "Oh, he was having some mental health days," right? He was just taking, he was taking some time off for mental health. That's all he was doing. Everybody's got to take care of their mental health. Now, Waltz, on the other hand, is far more serious in terms of what's gone on. And I think the stolen valor piece is probably the biggest one. Now, I've heard that he had, remember, he was supposed to deploy to Iraq and he didn't do it, right? He tapped out and then he went to go run for Congress. I had heard that or read somewhere that he did go to Afghanistan, but it was not as part of a troop that was going to support, right, Operation what? Desert Storm, right? Wasn't going to do that. So later on, he goes to Afghanistan as kind of a advisor or somebody like that. Like he plays that role, but he's not there under combat situations. He's there to, help these soldiers with their, their issues or whatever that is, right? So he does spend time in the Middle East, but he doesn't spend time in the Middle East when he's supposed to spend time in the Middle East. And stolen valor is a very big deal, right? Like claiming that you've done something and you haven't done that thing. And there are some people who are looking around and say, this might actually be some kind of a crime, right? So what happens? So normally, what would happen with somebody with stolen valor is that they'll be in a wartime situation and they'll get a medal for something that they didn't deserve, right? Like maybe somebody else did the thing that they actually did, but they died and nobody else was around, right? Think of like Don Draper, but instead Don Draper lives and he keeps his own name instead of the whoever he was before Don Draper, right? So I mean, it's kind of a big deal, right? It's kind of now, but there's more to Tim Walz than that. There's the record. There's the record of everything that happened in Minnesota during the time of George Floyd, where it all went to fucking hell under his watch. And a lot of those businesses that were burned and destroyed have never come back. Tim Walz never once made it a priority to bring those businesses back. Like it was just a shit show, total shit show. Not to mention that he wanted to put tampons in the boys' locker room. Like what, and all these women are like, oh, I kind of like the idea of that. Oh, he's going to be the guy that's going to send tampons to me just before I hit my cycle. There's something really cool and loving and manly about that. A man that's not afraid to give me a tampon. Like, what world do we live in? What inverted universe are we occupying now? It's, insane, right? So he's got all these weird things going on in his background. And if we had the same level of press that we had in 1972, I don't even think Tim Walz becomes governor of Minnesota, let alone vice president, because the press would have savaged him, right? But now the press doesn't do that. The press are the fifth estate, and they basically control politics. So Tim Walz in another time wouldn't even be Tim Walz. But tonight we're going to look at his connection mainly with China because it's there astrologically. But again, what do you do? What do you do with a guy like that? You understand his humanity. You understand that he's a victim of intergenerational abuse. And yet, if you allow him or somebody like him, right, based on the record alone with Minnesota doesn't really like, in my estimation, he's not a fan of America. So do you take that into account and say, you know what, he's just a poor bastard, and he really got the shaft many more times than a lot of other people, right? He got the shaft, but that's okay. He's part of the walking wounded, and you know, there for the grace of God go I, right? Uh, no, no. Now, perhaps we have to do nothing except notice, and then there's this thing called divine justice, which comes in and then regulates what happens. Okay, all right, I'm okay. I'm all right with that. I'm all right with that. And I think part of the reason why we got here and how we got here is that a lot of people kind of abdicated. They abdicated their voice and their participation in the so-called system for a long enough period of time until it got hijacked, and we are way down the line on this thing now, right? So I think we do have a responsibility when we see somebody who is potentially a major problem and a threat to not only our well-being, right, but the direction of the country, and as a result, the world. We probably need to say something. Now, I know there are people on the other side who feel the same way about Donald Trump, right? Like, so let's be clear about that. Everybody has their wicker man, right? Everybody has their wicker man. But I think with Waltz, it's it's deeper, and it's I think it's a bit more disturbing. There was this a lot more disturbing. There was this they had this moment with Waltz and his wife, and then Harris and Doug, Kamala and Doug, and they've just crowned them president and vice presidential candidate. And Kamala and Doug have the hug and the kiss down. Tim Walz sticks his hand out to shake his wife's hand. Like, what fucking husband does that? Right? What husband? Now, look, to be fair, Trump and Melania were a little awkward during the Republican convention at the end. There was a little one. It wasn't handshake awkward. It was a little awkward. And maybe part of it has to do with the fact that Trump does not seem like a PDA guy. He just doesn't. So when he has to do the PDA moment, it's maybe awkward for him. Or maybe it's due to the fact that they're not really together anymore, but they're married for Barron and the presidency or whatever. And so that's an awkward moment. But it's not handshake awkward. That's fucking awkward. Handshake awkward. Hey, honey, let me shake your hand. We've done a very good job to get to this place so we can destroy America. And she's like, you fool, get your ass over here so I can kiss you and it looks like we're together. Background says absolutely delightful. Saturated. I'm glad you like it. I'm glad I was looking high and low for the right background. Let's see who else do we have here. Lewis Walden in the house. Man, let's go on with that real estate market, Lewis. Any improvements? Yes, please hit the like, subscribe, notification bell. Let's get to 15K. Let's rock the bells with 15K. Lynette Jardine, the Queen of Speed. No, that's not Lynette Jardine. Mad Maxine. The Queen of Speed is Nora, whom I have not seen yet. Shirley Lociavo is here from Lake Anna, Virginia. What's going on, Cheryl? Good to see you. Secret Law 2007. Yes. All right. This is a little pitch for True Hemp Science. Look at it this way. When you're more relaxed and get more better sleep, you can make more money. So in a way, True Hemp Science products pay for itself. Thank you, Steve. It's an investment in your well-being. Definitely. If you haven't seen Friday's show, go check it out. It's a great show, and it's with Gaza or Gary Robson, who goes by Gaza Robson or Gaza Rob over on Twitter. And he was a football hooligan in his youth, left that, got a PhD, and started to write about the surveillance state. And very interesting character. I thought that for me, it was one of the best discussions that I've had and I've had some really, really good discussions on the Friday Forecast. But to get his perspective, right? Like how many times we get to have sort of the up close and personal from an English football hooligan, and not just any, but with Millwall, with like the most, the most celebrated. When I say celebrated, they're celebrated because they're certifiable badasses. Like they were the most notorious football gang, right, in England. So how many times we get kind of a view of that with somebody, right, and then being able to talk about their connection with the working class and English life, and then them segue into a whole discussion about the virtual world, the virtual prison programming, like. And we got to talk about the Sex Pistols too, which I always like. Let's see, who else do we have here? Yes, come join us, Astro Weather. We do this at 8 in the morning, Tuesday through Thursday. Down the Wombat Hole. What's up? Or in your case, since you're in Australia, what's down? What's down? What's up and down? Good to see you, Wombat. Let's see, who else do we have? Misbehaving too. Did I say that? Let's see. Our woke ones. That one, Heather Bakken. Hi, Heather. What's that? Joan W is here. Maria DeLange. What's going on, Maria? Are you happy that the Olympics are over? Bo Harrison in the house. Yes, you can buy me a cup of coffee. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. Since I have been demonetized, we got Chris, PYT, Chris P here, Capricorn Sun, Aquarius Moon, Sag Rising. There you go. Welcome, Chris PYT. I knew Robert was messing with me about the assault thing. Yes, I have to. Bill Brockman, energy's coming in strong and heavy now. Brace yourself for the energies. Oh, let's see. Pretty sure Dave Mins wrote Queen of Hearts and Juice Newton had the hit. That's interesting. By golly, Peter, I think you're right. Let's see. Fire God. Oh, it's whimsical. Change my name. Not even Fire Goddess. Fire God. 5DRG at work but listening. All right. We hope to make your work evening go by informed and faster. Let's see. Hey, Robert, which chart are you exploring? Tim Walz or his alter ego? He implied suffering PTSD from Afghanistan. That's right. Yeah, it's like, it's just weird. Like, so what I'm going to be looking at because I don't have a birth time for Tim Walz. So and I have what I think might be his rising sign. And Dr. John and I were talking about it today. And so we're kicking on rising signs. And I sort of boiled it down to, I think, 4. The top of my list for and you'll see it. The top of my list for Waltz is Taurus, because he kind of he's kind of big, right? He's kind of big, He so sometimes Taurus rising men, they could be really cut and sort of Adonis like, or they're very like kind of thick and kind of farm-like in some ways. And it puts a lot of his planets in the 12th house. The other rising signs I considered was Sagittarius rising, right? Because a lot of times people with Sagittarius rising wind up getting big, and they tell big tales and big stories. So I considered Sag rising. I considered Cancer rising for Tim Walz as well, and that's about it. Those were the ones, and I decided to roll with Taurus because there's so much that's hidden about Tim Walz that I'm gonna go with that. But I'd love to hear what you guys think in chat. What his rising sign might be, right? I'd love to hear what you think, and I'll go through some of the comments. But that's what I'm using for now. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take Tim Walz's chart and superimpose it on China's chart, because Tim Walz has a very deep relationship, long-standing with China. And ladies and gentlemen, astrology doesn't lie. Okay. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Misty. I had one of the worst weekends ever, feeling-wise. Oh, Misty. Misty. What can we do for Misty? Let's give Misty a hug in there. Give her a virtual hug. I'm sorry, Misty. Maybe we should play Misty for you. Unless you're a Clint Eastwood fan, you may not know what that is. Jolie Evans in the house. What's going on, Jolie? We got a Tondar sighting. What's up, Tondar? Big Papa. Sue Leonard checking in from Oz. Hi, Sue. Good to see you. Reckon it's Chiron. Algal 88 portal was so heavy. A lot of people, we did that thing last year, right? We did a Lionsgate kind of experiment last year. It didn't go well. Right? People came back and said, whoa, that was rough. That was really rough. So I know I did not engage with the Lionsgate activation this year. I left that alone. Right. So Atlantis rising in the house, not watching the Olympics. Why would I? So look, I'm kind of with you there, Atlantis. I'm kind of with you. I'm kind of with you. I'm like, I'm not. And listen, if you do watch the Olympics and you want to comment on it, I have no issue with you doing that. Right. I am not saying you're bad because you're watching. No, it's a free world, right? You can do whatever you want. If you want to comment on it or break it down or whatever, look, I've done shit like that since 2010, lots of times, right? And I think there's some value to it. But at this point, I'm like, I'm just not going to give my attention to it. And I could kind of care less. But don't let me stop you, because you might find something in there. Or just it's that final tumbler. It's that final tumbler in the lock. And then it clicks open, right? And then Dan Brown's universe comes roaring in. Epiphany, 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 epiphany. Nothing like a good epiphany. I'm into my own rituals. I like that, Rich. I like that. Joe Potter in the house. What's happening, Joe? Good to see you. I don't my beard here to the trees because they can't get out and about. There you go. You don't want to leave your beard hairs around for other people to practice sympathetic magic. Joe Potter, hurt people, hurt people. Yes, that's right. 100%. No offense, but Minnesota sucks. Do we have any what is it? The team is the Gophers, isn't it? Minnesota Gophers. We have any Gophers in the house? The only time I've been to Minnesota was the airport. So I have no firsthand knowledge of being in Minnesota. This is what I'm saying about Walz. He's generational, just like the Bushes. I think it's a little different. I don't think there's that whatever kind of overlay with the Bushes. I think Tim Walz's parents were lefties. They were lefties. Socialists dyed in the wool lefties. I think it's a little bit different. A little bit different. But who knows? Maybe they're playing for the same thing. Dead Wolf Resistance 13. Minnesota is full communist. Yes, thanks to Tim Walz and his predecessors. Catherine Rosen is in the house. Look at that. We got a CR sighting. What's up, Catherine? Good to see you. Let's see. Who else? Let's see. Charlie. What's happening, Charlie? What's happening? Old World Micmac. Love it. Jan Emily, we're living in hell. That's why we have to raise our vibration big time. Raise it up. Raise it up. Raise that vibration. Raise it up. I'm with you, Jan. Let's see. Folks should throw tampons at him. Oh. That's an interesting. Remember how they used to throw shoes? You got through a shoe at George Bush. Tampons. How about bloody tampons? Now, if you threw a bloody tampon at Tim Walz, would that be an act of terror? Versus just a plain unbloody tampon? Or what if you had a tampon with red food coloring on it, but it wasn't blood, but it looked like blood? Would that be considered an act of terror? Right? Because the person might get spooked that the tampon would be red, therefore might have blood. There could be some kind of transmission, but it's not. This is very interesting legal territory. Let's see. Fifth Estate Health. The press is the fifth column. Fifth Estate. There you go. Evan Taylor, who I think is from Minnesota, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, if memory serves. Walz ran for governor as a moderate and had turned into a super lefty. He was always a super lefty. He was a super lefty. He was just a wolf in sheep's clothing, as they were. Minnesota is basically Nordic, has the exact same problems somehow as Nordic countries. Well, I think that they have targeted the Nordic countries for infiltration. Moral shaming opponents is no longer effective. Charlie, that is one of the most astute things you have said in the entirety of these transmissions. I would agree with that. 100%. It's no longer effective. Why? Because nobody has any shame anymore. That's right. Nobody has any shame. Yes, we have the T-Cross, and we also have, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the moon is playing in the Grand Cross, right? Is that what we're talking about? I think so. Letro, 350 million people in the USA, and all the choices are mentally ill. They all have their interesting issues in their own way. Peter says, I heard someone describing Minnesotans as simultaneously being the most boring yet radical electorate. That's kind of interesting. I like this. Harriet says, I think politicians wear uniforms with their sponsors on them in my fantasy world. Oh, there wouldn't be any room on their clothing. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Knight of Cups in the house. Jesus Christo also in the house. What's happening, Jesus Christo? Sandra Jack Shaw, Kamala kissed her husband when they were both wearing masks. So that little latex pucker. Mike Bjork. What's happening, Mike? Good to see you. Let's see. Taffy Polensky's here. What's happening, Taffy? Lewis gives us some feedback on the real estate market. Very stagnant. Waltz's permanent frown is like a cartoon character. He looks just so frumpy, doesn't he? Wah, 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 wah. I did a meme over on Twitter, and I went to this AI creator, an app, and I said, "Give me a cross between Tim Walz and a walrus," and it did. And I put it on Twitter, and I said, "I am the walrus. I am the waltz." By the way, I had a show last week called "Walls to the Balls," and some other creators started using it. How dare they? Well, it's open season, and it's easy to figure out. Let's see. Millwall and Tottenham are the most notorious hooligans. Yes. You got that right, Maria. I'd like the Sex Pistols. I thought that. So somebody left in the comments on Friday's show. It was kind of an interesting comment. She said, "How do you feel?" And I think she was being actually like candid, right? How do you feel about adoring a band that, what's that guy, Mike Sage Aquay, who said that it was the most, the biggest psyop band and psyop of all time? Well, to be honest, I probably feel the same way about the Sex Pistols that Mike felt about learning about the Beatles. I'm sure he still likes the Beatles. And at the time, I was a 16-year-old kid. I liked loud music, and I liked defiant lyrics, and that's about where it took it for me. Let's see. Scott says, "Remember when John Kerry and his wife were compared to lobsters doing PDAs?" Yeah, these people are not. They're not comfortable in their own skin. They're just not. There's too much. Some of them aren't even really together, or they're not even really attracted to each other, right? It's all for show. That's all. I thought it's all for show. Yep. So I thought that he really nailed the fact that Westersize no gateway ritual experience, making boys becoming a man. So we create ones of our own. This is absolutely true. Carl Jung talks about this. And in the United States, if you're sort of in sort of the white lower middle class, right? You're rite of passage with football. You played on a football team, which was a lot harder 20 years ago than it is now, right? Because they would have 2-day practices, it'd be really hot, and it was like lots of hitting, right? Like it was, you had to kind of prove yourself if you played football, right? So there was that. Is it a complete rite of passage? No, not always, but it's sort of the one that we had. It still have to some degree. The other is joining the army, going to war. I don't think it's a great one, right? I just don't. So there's that, right? And then if you're kind of in a different world, it's a gang. You join a gang, and gangs have rituals. Now, fraternities have rituals. Sororities have rituals. Some of them are actually quite nasty. Those are reserved for a particular group of people. It's not for everybody, right? The Mormons have rituals. The Mormons go on mission. So they're gone for 2 years, right? They're out there saving the Ebionites. So they have a ritual. In Switzerland and in Israel, you spend 2 years in the army, no matter who you are. Well, theoretically, I'm sure there's some Swiss. Like, did Roger Federer, was he part of the Swiss army? Maybe he was. I don't know. But that's what you do in both those countries. You spend 2 years basically being a part of the army. And by the way, I'm actually for that. However, I would do it a little bit differently. What I would do is I would have 1 year of military service. You'd break it up, right? You just kind of break it up. So it wouldn't just be one and then the other because you got to retain your body of knowledge, right? So you have a total of 1 year military service, and that year is split up into 2 6-month operations, right? And then you have another year of what I would call social service, which means that you're in the community, you're volunteering, maybe you're helping out with disaster relief or something, or whatever it is, right? So you get the military side and you get the social side. And I could see where you could go 6 months military and then 6 months social. Then you break it up and then you go 6 months military and then 6 months social. And at the end of that 6 months social, which is really more about where you're going, right? You're going to go back into the world. So you use that 6 months social to literally put yourself into the world. You get 2 years worth of credit at some kind of a university or a school where you want to apply that for a trade or whatever, right? And you get paid and stuff along the way. I would be a big proponent of that. And I'll go one step further. Page out of Robert Heinlein's book that's the only way you vote. That is the only way you vote. Now you can opt out of that, right? But you're not going to vote, right? You have no say over how things unfold, right? But I would say mandatory, and you get to vote with it, or it's not mandatory. Well, no, mandatory. If you don't want to do it, you can still live in the side, but you don't reap the benefits. And most people, I think, would want to reap the benefits. Anyway, let's see who else we have here. Hi, all. This is from Rama. Ready for next week to pass on by. Listening, but AFK. All right. Oh, my kid did it. So your kid chose Fire God. That's interesting. User 13 is here. Susie says, Robert, I swear I was thinking Taurus too. There you go. His eyes are sort of cow-like to me. His eyes are dead. He's got dead eyes. Jesus Christo, Taurus is a sign of bullshit. Oh. Yes, indeed. It's a sign of a lot more than that, too. Libra, no. Sorry. No, he's no fucking Libra rising. No. He'd be way more attractive than that. There is something weirdly feminine about him. Well, Taurus is ruled by Venus, right? Rising Aquarius, that would put his moon in the first house. Maybe. I would say Sagittarius rising have long, thin faces and are tall. They are tall. They don't always have long, thin faces, though. I am almost Sagittarius rising with Jupiter and Sagittarius in my first house. And I don't think I have a long, thin face. That's just me. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Sag rising and my face is round. Very interesting. I've gotten there too, and I realized that it was thanks to the beer. So if you want to lose the round face, cut back on the hops. I got those Sag rising thighs though. Let's see. I am Sag rising. I'm a very thing. Okay. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Going for Taurus, the lumbering body language. So I think Taurus is kind of in front here. That's what I'm getting. Olympics is over. Now the war has begun. Hi, Kevin. What's happening? Let's see. Heather Bakken, Sag rising or Cancer, mainly due to Sag, due to polarities. I thought about Sag rising as well. Definitely. Fire God says, don't forget to check out Jupiter-Mars conjunction in the sky tonight, along with meteor shower. Check it out. Paralympics begin soon. Oh, Jasper biting Peachy in the butt. What's that all about? Minnesota chicks can't get with Wisconsin guys. Have you ever seen what a badger does to a gopher hole? Tom. Tom. Let's see. Who else do we have? Are we up to speed here? Artist Sear. Lana Labonte. We're slowly coming in here. Christine Moses with us. Hi, Christine. Good to see you. Let's see. Tabasco is red. Tabasco is red. I think if the Tabasco got in his eyes, that's a terror threat. That's a terror threat. I don't think you can go with Tabasco. That's a weapon. That's a weapon. Now, maraschino cherry sauce, that's completely different. Doctor Who came up with the 13 keys since 1980. I've seen it. And I think Harris is what, like 8-5 over Trump? Or no, let's see. Yeah, 8-5 over Trump. That's what I've seen. I've read it. Okay. This is actually a really good point right there. Right there. They're trying to set up Iran for tampering with our election so they can shut it down this year. Here's what I think. Found you, been looking all over. Finally showed up far down the list. That's what they do. Charlie, I am astute. Well, stutes have more fun. Let's see. What else do we have here? Are we all in? Tim Walz has a very masky face. That's coming from Uki. Let's see. I think we're caught up. Arranged marriages are even scarier than our deranged marriages. Elephant is Scorpio in Vedic astrology. That's interesting. My spirit animal surely says is a hawk. We have one nesting on our property. I named him Ethan. I love that. Natalie Remington, they couldn't get water back in my dad's day until coach said, okay. And you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. Punk is dead by Crass. Couldn't get behind Crass. I know who they are. Couldn't get behind them. Once it got into like heavy duty noise and not my thing. Not my thing. I understand it. I can appreciate it. It's like listening to fucking Mersbo, right? Or Nurse with Wound. I get it. I appreciate it. Not my thing. Sex Pistols Rebellion worked on me in hindsight. The youth were totally played. Sure. I can see that. Totally see it. I was already there. Sorry. Yeah, I was already surfing the wave. I just caught the wave. Let's see. Where are we? Let's get into this. Swiss Army is Nazis. They're just trying to stack their team against the welfare states. I agree with Robert, 2 to 4 years. I would say 2 years. 2 years. So you can be guaranteed to die for a banker's war. No thanks. I don't think the Swiss have died for a banker's war now, have they? Oh, I forgot they are the bankers. No, I don't. Once you're done, you're done. You're done. There's no cohesion in this country. And I know Christine has very different ideas about government, so I don't want to get in the weeds here. But there's no cohesion. Now, Robert, these are private matters folks discuss with their plumber after sewer cleaning. Isn't that what we're doing here? Are we cleaning the sewer here? I thought we were doing that. That's what I thought. All right, we got to get into Elle Foxworth and then Olivia Provorce and Kelly B. And I think we're done. I think we're caught up. Let's get into the show. I'm an hour in, and I'm still saying hi to all of you. which I love, but there are people who will watch us and they'll say, "Will this motherfucker start talking about astrology?" Okay. All right, why don't we take a look at the Walz chart that I have rectified as Taurus rising. And you guys tell me what you guys think of this. And I'll tell you my rationale. All right. So I have him at roughly 5 degrees. I'll tell you why I have him at 5 degrees Taurus rising. And I probably could maybe get it even a little closer, maybe two Taurus. But if you listen to Tim Walz, okay, so first of all, let's talk about Taurus rising. Big, right? He's big. I've always contended that there are two types of rising signs or two types of Taurus rising for both men and women. For women, you will get like very kind of buxom, sensual, very Taurian like vibes. Sometimes they can be over Taurian, and we're kind of into Venus of Willendorf territory, right? Like that can happen. It can also happen with Taurus Sun, but by and large, you get like the beauty and the earthy sensuality of Venus for women. Then you get the other version of Taurus, which is much more like stocky and solid, right? At times kind of wide in the body. And I would say, kind of more earthy and utilitarian. So one is kind of the Venusian model, the other is kind of the Earth model. And I think you get the same with men. In men, you'll have like guys that are more cut, built, and then you get the sort of the haystack Calhoun type. You know what I'm talking about, right? So that's kind of how I see Taurus rising, because I've seen people with Taurus rising, both men and women, and they both fit into that category. Now, one of the things that Walz has, whatever you think about him, he can speak very convincingly. Even when he's lying, he can speak very convincingly. So I think that places Mercury on or around the ascendant. Okay, that's what I think. He's good. Again, I'm not a fan of the guy, but I've watched him speak, and he speaks with some degree of authority. Okay. So Jupiter is technically in a wide conjunction with the ascendant. So, I could like dial this back to about maybe 2, right? This is a rough mix. This is a rough mix. This is just like the vocals, the drum and the bass. I haven't thrown in the guitar or the keyboard fills on this. This is a rough mix. You could probably get it to about maybe 2 or 3 Taurus. You still have the Mercury on not on the ascendant, but close to it. Jupiter gets a little bit closer to the ascendant, and then he gets a little bit bigger. You know what I mean? Right? Because that's what Jupiter does. Makes you a little bit bigger on the ascendant. Okay, so let's just roll with that. I think that with this chart, what it does is it isolates his Aries planets in the 12th house. And because he's born, I guess West Point, Nebraska isn't too far north, right? But you can tell that when you begin to move into the sort of the upper latitudes, the charts begin to change, and certain houses become bigger and certain houses become smaller. So when you are born in a place like Finland or Iceland or Sweden, everything's really distorted. The same thing happens when you go further south. Certain houses get smaller, other houses get bigger, right? So when this is just an astrological thing that I've done. When I work with people from those areas, I don't normally use whole signs or equal house, but I will for those people because it's almost ridiculous trying to read their charts. All right, so in this case, you can see the big wide sixth house, fairly wide seventh and first, and then the big wide 12th house. So in the 12th house, we have the intercepted house, right? And that's all of his Aries stuff, which is what? His army shit, right? Aries is army. It's army. It's the centurion. It's police, right? It's the warrior. It's the male aspect. And it's hidden away. Like, what do we really know? Well, we know what he's been able to tell the rest of us about what he did, but then it came out that, well, didn't really go down like that, right? Didn't really go down like that. So the Mars thing, I think, is, again, if this is true, right? We're just playing with this now, but if this is true, I think the Mars thing in the 12th house is problematic. Why is it problematic? I think in this case, I think it's the inconjuncts, and is the inconjunct with Neptune and with the sun, right? 16, 17, Neptune, seventh house, which in some ways kind of explains his relationship with his wife. Anyway, and then the inconjunct right here with Mars and Uranus in Virgo. So what do I mean by all of that? So the inconjunct, again, 150 degrees within 3 degrees orb of this planet 17, 16. We got it. And then here, 6 and 6, 150 degrees. We got now. I always find inconjuncts with Aries and Scorpio interesting, like inconjuncts between Taurus and Libra, interesting, because Taurus and Libra share the same planet, even though they will appear at 150 degrees. And at one point in time, Scorpio and Aries shared the same planet with Mars. So the inconjunct is different than, say, I don't know, Capricorn and Leo, or Capricorn and Gemini. Those two signs have nothing in common, but Scorpio and Aries kind of do, based on their planet of origination. Okay, so here, the whole idea is that there's something on the back end of a planet, i.e., the inconjunct, which is like a program that's running. Like it's a running program that is very difficult to resolve or close. Like the individual may not even be aware that that program is running. Now, if you are aware, then you have some insight into what you do with an inconjunct. So with an inconjunct, you have to figure out how to intuitively cross the chart, right? And I think the idea of the broken line or the broken path is appropriate, right? Why didn't they just use the green line just to denote it's an inconjunct? Well, some sites do. Some sites use different colors, but Astro Deans uses a broken green line because it is a broken path, right? It's not always discernible. The red lines, the squares, right? Those are dissonant. You know what's happening there, right? The blue lines, sextile, trine, those are harmonic. You can kind of feel them. If you understand your chart and understand how to work with those elements, you can feel it. You can tap into it. The inconjunct is different. It's like you don't know how to integrate it, right? And you have to integrate it, because if you don't integrate it, then it could, I think, be very problematic, right? It's like a blind spot that you're not aware of. So with a Neptune in conjunct with the sun, could we make a connection here that Tim Walz, his back door, because remember these are like programs that are running in the background, right? Is his back door compromised? Right? Is some this is, does this allow him to be easily compromisable in terms of his identity? And I would think that one could make a case for that. If you look at his son, it's very close to being a singleton, right? We have minor aspect, minor aspect, minor aspect biquintile, right? Like minor aspects are what they are. They're minor. So next week I'm gonna dedicate. I've been thinking about this. Next week I'm gonna dedicate a portion of the show to looking at minor aspects because I think it'll be good, right? Because in some ways they're interesting. But when you have a planet that's like this and not aspected by any of the other planets, like who is he? It's not quite a singleton, but it's about as close to a singleton as you can get. I think Tim Walz thinks he knows who he is, but I don't think he really knows who he is. Why is that? Because I think it's Neptune, right? Neptune, the thing that's lurking back there, back here, right? He's hackable with Neptune in conjunct, which means that he as he presents himself to the world, right? He is being in some ways driven because there's nothing else going on with that sun except the minor aspects. So he's being in some ways driven by this Neptune in conjunct. And I think when we take it out of Scorpio for a second, when we just talk about Neptune, right? Neptune can be incredibly idealistic, right? Like at the height of Neptune, you're vibrating with the heavens, right? You're seeing God and everything is one, right? That's like the height of Neptune. Like you are part of everything, right? And then you have the deep downside of Neptune, which is the basement, literally and figuratively, right? So Neptune, as it relates to Pisces, right, it has a very wide vector. And as a result of that, right, there can be a lot of delusion that goes around with Neptune. Like, even if you're up there theoretically vibrating with the heavens, right, who's to say whether or not you're actually even really sane? Right? That's Neptune. It's kind of like Don Quixote or something like that. Jousting with windmills. But I think that would be with Don Quixote, that might be more Neptune Sun opposition. This isn't even that clear, right? This is not even that clear. So what do you do with it in conjunct? Well, if this were Tim Walz, right, you would have to literally walk back Neptune, right? Walk back Neptune to the sun. Because Neptune's retrograde, so you have to walk backwards. You can't walk forwards. So what does that mean? Right? What does that mean? It means that on some level, right, he has to incorporate Neptune into his life. The illusion, the delusion, the possibility for spiritual redemption, perhaps even the degradation, like everything that goes along with it, heaven and hell. Like he has to walk that across the chart so that he can become aware of it. Because that's what Neptune will bring you. It will bring you heaven and it will bring you hell. So he has to walk it across the chart. And to do that is not easy. It's not easy to do, especially with Neptune, and especially if there's a lot of issues that go along with it. I think the individual could actually suffer a breakdown if they don't do it in the correct manner, right? If they don't have some kind of either spiritual or psychological guide, like they have to be aware of this, right? And the thing with Neptune, right, is that it's also very much like the 12th house. So there's a lot of burial with Neptune. It's like let's just throw it overboard and let it sink deep into the ocean, which is very much like the 12th house. Like, when you're living your chart, when you're living your life, and you have these experiences in your life that are incomplete with people, like there's no completion. Like a friendship that went, bad, hit the rocks, and you weren't able to really like resolve that friendship or a relationship or whatever, right? Like there are these things in life that are incomplete, and we all experience them. So theoretically, where do they go? They go to the 12th house. That's where they go. And when Saturn goes through your 12th house, that's when it starts to literally be like a minesweeper of the previous 28 years since the last time it was there. And you get to dredge all that up, right? Everything that is incomplete or unfinished or the highlights or the lowlights, depending on what they are, they get dredged up. And what's interesting, this is my experience, is that people who perform these things that help you achieve some degree of completion or even some degree of like revelation, maybe it's your own role, what happened, they don't even have to be the same people. It just has to be the same dynamic, right? Like there's stand-ins in the universe. So everything goes to the 12th house that psychologically is, it doesn't have any, it's like, that's where it goes. And eventually you have to go there. You have to go through all of that, right? Until you get to Saturn that hits the ascendant and you're in rebirth mode. All right. So we know that the 12th house is a repository of like unfinished business and life junk, baggage. Neptune is the ruler of the 12th house. It operates in a very similar function, right? So for Walz, what's interesting about Neptune is that, okay, trine Uranus, sextile Uranus, sextile Pluto, that's generational. That doesn't really do anything, but he does have this trine with Chiron. And that's kind of interesting and can be healing. What happened to him between the age of 15 and 17, that's where you're going to find his chirotic crisis. So that would be his sophomore to his senior year in high school, right? Something happened with Tim Walz during that time. Now, in a basic fundamental chart, Chiron Neptune trines can be very good for healing, right? They can be very unconditional. I got fucked up this way. I'm not going to judge other people that got fucked up this way. Oh, well, now we're maybe getting somewhere, right? Now we're maybe getting somewhere because maybe what Tim Walz is doing with all of his LGBTQ plus tampon Tim marching in the Pride Parade with the kids, being the advisor for the gay club on campus where he's the school coach. Maybe this is this Chiron Neptune trine, right? And maybe what he's trying to do is he's trying to express this, kind of unconditional self-acceptance, which he's theoretically trying to do with himself. I'm just throwing it out there, right? I think that would be a function of the Chiron Neptune trine, right? When you get into Pisces, like not judgmental, compassion, forgive, right? Empathy, Forgive them, Lord. They don't know what they do, right? But it's the inconjunct. I think that's the one that's potentially the most troubling. And what's interesting from a numbers perspective, right? We can see that Chiron is at 16, so the Chirotic crisis happens between 15 and 17. He's got the sun at 16, and he's got Neptune at 17. I guarantee you that this is where Tim Walz in his life hits the rocks. I think it's around the same time that his father dies, if I'm not mistaken. His father dies, I think, at around 18, right? And that's very Saturnian. Anyway. But I think that is the back door. It is this Neptune in conjunct with the sun. And kind of getting in there and, hacking the individual, right? In order for him, again, if you're my client, I'd say, brother, you need some help. You need to resolve this Neptune sun thing going on. You need a skilled therapist. I would say, Tim, go hang out with Shadow, and go have what do you call that stuff that you smoke? It's that crazy shit. What is it? Anyway, go take DMT, Tim. No, not really. I wouldn't advise that. Your demons would be too great. But I do think that there's something there, right? Now, let's talk about literal programming, okay? Literal programming. He's been to China over 30 times, spent a year there with World Teach, and we know how good the Asians are about programming. I saw the Manchurian Candidate. That guy that played Wo Fat in Hawaii Five-0. Basically the same fucking character, right? He's in Manchurian Candidate. So I'm just spitballing a bit here, but I do think that there's something there, right? I also feel like if we're talking compromise, that's the compromisable part. And it doesn't matter what his rising sign is, that inconjunct is going to show up anywhere in the chart. All right. So he's a 12th house person. Theoretically, we don't know a lot about him, at least in this chart, if that's true. Also, Mars in Aries in the 12th house. Now we got another inconjunct, and this is with Uranus. Now, to me, again, wherever it shows up in the chart, this is somebody who could snap, right? They can fucking snap with Uranus in conjunct. And since it's in Virgo and conjunct Pluto, like I wouldn't want to be around this guy when he loses his temper. I think it could get kind of scary, actually. And again, what is that all about? What happened at a certain point in time in his life, right? Where, again, with this inconjunct, it's going to be very explosive. To me, like both of these inconjuncts, I think could pass for trauma, right? They could pass for trauma, but they're different. Neptune is quite different than Uranus. And the sun and Mars, they're not entirely different, right? They're both connected to life force, energy, expression, but Uranus is very different than Neptune. This is explosive. So something happened to Walz somewhere along the way. And again, whether his Mars is in the 12th house or whatever, to me, that's a ticking time bomb. That is a ticking time. The other thing that reminds me of him bailing out on his troops, right? It's like all of a sudden, oh, I'm good. I got to run for Congress. I'm good. You guys, go get him. Go get him. I got to go. To me, that's Uranus. It's like sudden, right? It's like sudden. And all of a sudden, his will activates. Now, Do you want, look, they all have their warts. Okay, they all have their freaking warts. But do you want somebody that's got that Uranus Mars in conjunct, which can like just turn and snap? Uh, I don't think so. Right? I don't think so. So again, I'm just rolling with a 12th house Taurus rising chart. I could be completely wrong. I'm going to endeavor to get his birth time. Like I think the state of Nebraska, because he's born. Isn't it interesting? Like this is the shit that says, yeah, the world really is a matrix. Yeah, the world really is a simulation. He's born in West Point, Nebraska. What do you think of West Point? Well, you think of West Point, the academy, which he never went to, by the way, but he was born in West Point. I mean, the whole thing is kind of weird, right? So I think Nebraska allows you to go in and actually get records. So I am going to endeavor to do that tomorrow and see if I can get Tim Walz's birth certificate or birth time. As a public figure, it's supposed to be on the record, generally speaking. Generally speaking, right? Kamala Harris, she's got some sketchy birth shit and she's got a birth certificate. All right, let's keep going. So, where do I think that this, besides everything I just talked about, where do I think the chart is problematic? Well, why don't we start with, I want to talk about the moon in Aquarius a little bit. So, if you go to 12 noon, all right, let's do this. I'm going to do this. Let me just do this here. I'm going to do something. If you go to 12 noon with Tim, it's high. It's 12 noon with Tim. It's coffee hour with Tim. That'd be lunch, wouldn't it? All right, I want to do something. Just give me one sec here. I think I got rid of his chart. Let's do this. Hold on. You guys will crack up over this. All right, give me one second. Okay, so we got Tim Walz. All right, he's a male. He's born in April. He's born in 1964, the year of the dragon. Let's give him a 12 noon birth time on this. And his birthday is April 6th. Okay. April 6th, 12 noon. I'm pretty sure this will get us there. And we're going to go West Point. Nebraska, right? Yes. There we go. There she blows. I'm just going to do the natal chart. And I think this is going to work. Yes. Okay. All right. So if we give him a 12 noon birth time, which, by the way, for those of you who said he's a Cancer rising, kind of makes him a Cancer rising. Puts the sun in the 10th house, Mars on the midheaven, right out there for all to see. Like, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with this birth time. Like, I think we could probably make a case for it as well. But what I want you to pay attention to is that moon at 3 degrees Aquarius, right? 3 degrees Aquarius. Do you know who has the moon at 3 degrees Aquarius? Vladimir Lenin has the moon at 3 degrees Aquarius. Guess who else has the moon at 3 degrees Aquarius? John Lennon. So both Lennons have moon in Aquarius at 3 degrees. I think that's kind of interesting, right? But even if he doesn't have the moon in Aquarius at 3 degrees, pretty damn close at this time, at least. I think the moon in Aquarius is interesting, right? It's an interesting moon because it is pretty non-attached in a lot of ways, like not attached. There's a lot of observing going on with the Aquarian moon, but it's also like different. This is different, you know. And again, because it's detached, right? People with Aquarian moons, they like to watch. They like to observe things. And if you again, if you go through the annals of the internet and you type in moon in Aquarius, one of the words that will come up with moon in Aquarius is voyeur. Right? Voyeur. So the way that emotions are processed through the moon in Aquarius are very different, right? They're more group conscious. They're sort of more removed. They don't take things as personally, right? They can be very cool in terms of temperament, and sometimes they can be very cold in terms of temperament. I think it's an interesting moon. It can be very social, but there's also like, how does that person express what they do? Not every Aquarian moon is the same, right? Not every degree is the same. Not every house placement's the same. Not every angular relationship is the same. So just to say that the Aquarian moon is just this one thing as a blanket statement would be unfair. But we also have to say that there are certain definitions of the thing that we're talking about, right? Baselines. We know at moon in Virgo, critical as hell, right? Like it's just critical. The moon in Aquarius is distant, right? It is if it's the mother in the chart, the mother is detached. There's not always a lot of feeling coming from the mother with moon in Aquarius. Or they're going to be kind of different, right? They're going to be a different kind of mom. Maybe they're the sort of the modern, new age equivalent would be moon in Aquarius, the mom that doesn't vaccinate their kid, right? Or the mom who everything is organic, and it's like that kind of mom. Now, not a bad mom, by the way, just on the record, right? But the other thing with Aquarius is that we know that, and again, there are people who say, you hate Aquarians. You hate them. I don't hate Aquarians. I think they're fascinating. I find all the signs fascinating. I feel like they're all just part of my, extended family. And sometimes you got a crazy or kooky uncle or aunt in your extended family. Doesn't mean you don't like them, right? But they're part of your family. That said, let's talk about the moon in Aquarius as it relates to family, because the moon is your family too, right? It is the ruler of the fourth house. The fourth house is where you get what? You get your emotional influences from the fourth house. So if that's true, then you would get your emotional influences also from the moon, right? So what do we know about Tim Walz's parents? They were activists. They were activists. It fits the moon in Aquarius perfectly in that milieu. And perhaps of the father and the mother might have been more of the activist than the father. Of the two, I think he had problematic relationships with both. Of the two, I think Saturn is the one that's more problematic than the moon, right? If you were to sit down and really ask Tim Walz which parent he was closer to, he'd say his mother. Now, that may have to do with something, have something to do with the fact that his father died when he was 18 years old, right? So he's able to build a relationship with his mother beyond the terminus of his father. So at that point in time, it's just a familiar piece of familiarity. But I would say even before that, he probably felt closer to his mother. Well, why is that? Well, the moon has this nice angle, even if it's at 3 degrees, it's in sextile with Mars right there. Boom. It's in trine with Venus right there. Boom. So there are these harmonic angles to the moon or harmonic angles to the mother, right? There's also squares. One of the squares is Jupiter. Jupiter squares are not terrible squares. They can get you to overestimate your ability sometimes, right? Or overestimate your risk reward factor, right? But I think they're interesting. The Mercury Moon square is something different altogether. And is that about his mother, or is that more about um, being really stubborn? Right? Because I think even with the moon in Aquarius, if you want to have a system that's abundantly fair, right, that would be the moon in Aquarius. Like, all boats rise. Um, we're going to be, I don't know, harder on corporations who are, theoretically either polluting the environment or, socking away their money, in some foreign account or whatever. We're going to be harder on them, and we'll be on the side of unions and the people, which I think could be very kind of moon and Aquarian, right? And so that it's kind of starts off that way, but then you get Mercury and Taurus, and it doesn't end that way. Because Mercury and Taurus as well, we got to make a few sacrifices. We got to break a few eggs and make an omelet, right? That's the Mercury Moon square. And when you're dealing with Taurus, you're dealing with things that are more pragmatic, right? Or prima materia, like, well, that's a really great idea, but this is the brass tacks, and this is what really has to happen. But I think it could also work in some ways towards this idea of this, Aquarian or utopian model, but it would be based on what Waltz might think it is versus the model itself, right? So I think the square is problematic. And in astrology, when you get into that Mercury Moon square, and this is what people that have this in their chart, like, they're not always listening to their instincts, which is what the moon would represent. And so they'll do this kind of mental override with Mercury, which is kind of weird, right? Like, it's not uncommon. We all have a version of that in our lives. But so the moon is instinctual, but it also represents our family. So for some people, that kind of relationship with emotions and instinct and family, it gets cross-wired, right? So when they are trying to, like, listen to their gut or their instincts to make a decision, the family stuff can bleed through, because that's really what the moon is about. And if you've had a difficult time with your family, what are you going to do? You're going to say, well, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to follow this because there's something about, the circuitry of the moon, which translates itself into your relationship with your family. So you override it with, okay, well, I think I know what's best. I'm not going to do that. And then later on, I went, fuck, I should have done that. And it takes a while with the Mercury Moon square to integrate it, right? It's like, I fucking should have listened to myself. Because the key with the Mercury Moon square is you have to go back to your family, you have to go back to your mother, right? You have to like understand that relationship. You have to understand the input, the influence, and are you reacting to that, right? Or are you in service of your deeper natural instinct, right? And emotion, your intuition. Like, that's a big one. That's a real big one, because the idea ultimately is to fuse the two together, right? And when you get into a square, we're getting into this dynamic action. where you're running into, right? You're running into the hard flint, right? The hard flint of that square. So, the idea is to integrate so that you can theoretically work both. It's a challenge. I think it's one of the harder squares in astrology because what happens, right, is that until you really get it, you don't always trust yourself. You don't know you don't always trust yourself. There's this sense of, all right. I know I should do this because that could work the other way too. It's like, I know I should do this. I know I should do this. But if I do this, I'm going to cut against the grain of my family. The family comes up again. So I can't do this. So I think if you have this in your chart and this has been a problem for you, and some of you, like, you've solved it, right? You've solved the math problem. But if some of it's been a problem for you, some of it's been that's where you go. Where you have to go into that place. You have to kind of look at your conditioning and then see how by making certain decisions in your life, you've supported the conditioning on some level. All right, I'm done with that. But he has that, right? He has that. And then he has the Jupiter moon square. And I think that Jupiter moon square pumps up his radicalism. That's what I think. I think it pumps up his radicalism. It's like, let's take it to 11. Like, especially with Jupiter and Aries. Now, if that moon is closer to 3, it'll still be in there. It'll still be in the square. I okay. So I think that is a dangerous square because that Jupiter in Aries can be really, really martial, like really martial. Okay, as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking about the police in Minneapolis, right? I'm thinking about the police in Minneapolis and the stand down and his daughter, who's a part of his family. Hello, Moon, his family, his current family, told people that, hey, my dad's governor and he's going to stand down. So if you want to go out there and raise some holy hell, giving you a heads up. Or his wife, right? Part of his family. The idea is, when the fires were burning, I opened the window so I could take that smoke in. This is what she said, right? That's the Jupiter moon square, right? It is inflaming, right? It's inflaming the situation. And with this moon in Aquarius, the idea is like, we're going to create fucking utopia, right? Everybody is equal, the same, and fair in moon and Aquarius land. And then Jupiter comes in and says, hold on one second. Hold on one second. Not everybody's fair. Not everybody's fair. It's not always fair. Right? Aries doesn't believe in fair. It doesn't. Libra believes in fair. What's he got in Libra? Right? So Aries, sorry, not fair. This is the way it is. And if you don't like it, my way or the highway. That's Aries. So you get that Jupiter and Aries squaring off against the moon. Like, this is utopia. Oh, Rome will burn, though. Minneapolis will burn. Hello. Fire. Right? And even though they're in square with each other, it's air and it's fire. So it will be very combustible. Perhaps even more combustible with a square. Like, when we think of Jupiter, right? What does Jupiter rule? It rules Sagittarius. And what is Sagittarius all about? Sagittarius is about systems, right? It's about systems of religion, systems of philosophy, right? Systems. So Jupiter rules that. So when you get Jupiter in Aries, Like, we're still talking about system, but we're talking about Aries systems. And when we think of Aries, what do we, somebody brought up, the Nazis and Hitler, right? I just think that when you get into Jupiter and Aries, I'm going to take that, just put it on the side. I think that you have the potential for totalitarianism with Jupiter and Aries, right? It's force. It is like force, but it's expansive force. And you square off against that moon, right? Whoa, look out. So, yeah, I think it's problematic. Like, I think these two squares are problematic. Now, if you're on the left, oh, fuck, I love that shit. Oh, come on. Come on, Tim, you bring the fire and I'll bring the kerosene, right? Or Mercury square moon. That's right. You make those decisions, those hard decisions that we need to have so that we can have our woketopia. You go ahead, Tim. You got my vote, right? But that doesn't really work because that's partisan thinking. I'm just looking at the guy's chart. Okay, I'm telling you what I see. Now the reason why he's able, this is weird though, like he's able to connect with women. And I think it's this Mars sextile to Venus in his chart. Like this whole tampon Tim thing, they kind of like it. I saw this meme was one of the most cringy, mind-blowing fucking memes I've ever seen ever. And it's somebody with a blue check mark, probably from the old days, not the new days. And she looks like, sort of typical stringy haired white ally female, right? And she says this. She talks about how having sex with JD Vance, and she says that if I had sex with JD Vance, I would probably start to think about my grocery list 2 or 3 minutes in. But Tim Walz, on the other hand, he would pin me down and slam me until my knees buckled. I'm like, what the fuck? I swear to God, I saw this on Twitter. It's not even a meme. It's somebody who's talking about it. Like, really? Is that how you see this guy? Like, he's got this brutal look about him. Well, what she's picking up on is the fact that there is something going on there, but it is not going to be, the plug in the socket. I'm just being a little upfront here, right? And it's not a plug in a socket kind of thing, but that's how she's interpreting it. And that's the Mars Venus sextile, right? It's like getting along with women. He will be popular with the female electorate. But now we run into the problem with Venus. Let's talk about the Venus problem. Venus and Gemini, okay? So Venus and Gemini means that he's a little split about relationships. He's a little split. That's how Gemini works, right? There's kind of like two versions of relationship with Venus and Gemini. And I've often felt that Venus and Gemini is kind of like this. People with Venus and Gemini will alternate between basically two types, right? And there could be variations on those two types, but it'll be two types. One type will be very, very intellectual. Talking about relationship, very intellectual, brainy, right? Talks about anything, stimulating conversation, which Venus and Gemini needs, by the way. They need stimulating conversation. But they'll choose somebody who's like all brain. And they're like, well, I'd really like a bit more of a visceral type, right? And so maybe they break up. And the next thing you know, they got the visceral type. And they're like into it. Oh my God, this is great. Right. Like I don't have to talk all the time or listen all the time. And that was really stimulating, but it was getting a little neurotic. And now, oh my God, he doesn't talk very much at all. But man, right? He's not in his head. And that's cool for a while until Venus and Gemini gets bored again. It's like, God, you know, he's really, quite satisfactory in some ways, but I didn't notice. He's not very bright. I took that to be kind of animal magnetism. And I can't even really have an in-depth conversation with this guy. Yeah, I think I need somebody a little more intellectually stimulating. I mean, this is how it works, right? So the idea with Venus and Gemini is that you're trying to get that relationship that has all those elements in one person. And it's not undoable. Men have their own version of this, by the way. It's not undoable, but with Gemini, it kind of alternates a little bit, right? So he has Venus and Gemini, and we know that there, to some degree, is compartmentalization within relationship. To some degree, right? So what does he have? He's got a Venus-Saturn square. That is his fucking relationship with his wife. I'll tell you that right now. That was, let me shake your hand, honey. That's Venus-Saturn square. Now, to be fair, those are relationships. They're not always real sexy, right? They're not always real sexy, but they can be, long-standing, right? Like I don't shit on Venus-Saturn squares in charts. Like if somebody has a Venus-Saturn square in their chart, I don't shit on it. Because what happens is that if you choose one relationship and you take your time in the choosing of that relationship, then over time it will mature, right? To me, Venus Saturn squares they're almost like arranged marriages. They're the arranged marriage of astrology outside of a culture that gives you an arranged marriage. So in Tim Walz's case, right, is his relationship with his wife an arranged marriage? Maybe that's the role she's playing, an arranged marriage. Maybe she's a beard, right? Or maybe, like a fine wine that only gets better with age, the Venus Saturn square will do that. Who knows? Maybe if they get elected in 2 years, instead of the handshake, she'll be twerking on stage and he'll be right behind her. But I think that that's his marriage. And again, I'm trying not to be judgmental here, but it seems very formal, right? And then he's got the Venus Uranus square, which I think is kooky. And again, you have it in your chart, no judgment here, right? Venus Uranus square, relationships have very weird narratives. Very weird narratives. Right? Like, oh, I can't believe how I met this person. It was under the strangest circumstances. And he's not somebody that I would normally date. Right? But man, it is very unusual. Now all of a sudden, he's kind of interesting. I had a client a long time ago. She doesn't listen to this show. I can guarantee you. So I can tell the story. I'm not going to tell you your name. And so weird. It was very, very weird. The whole thing was kind of weird. But I never met this person. So her husband passed away. This is one of those kind of ongoing client relationships where I was really trying to help her get through this mess that her husband had left behind. And she has this Venus Uranus square in her chart, and her husband passed away suddenly, which sometimes can happen with the Venus Uranus square. And the next thing, like, a couple months down the line, she has this guy who enters her life, and he's there to kind of deal with the computers and passwords and shit, right? And he's completely different from her, right? She is of kind of one sort of persuasion vector, think, oh, I don't know, think New York. Okay, New York. He, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is Cuban and he's younger, right? And it's like the two of these people meeting together really happens under like a Venus Uranus square. And so she starts telling me about this relationship. I was like, okay, all right, that's interesting. That's interesting. And then he starts to tell her about like the New World Order and the Illuminati and all this other 2010 kind of stuff. I'm, oh, he's red pilling this woman. That's interesting. But then, we talked about because she lived in a fairly exclusive area in Florida. And then we talked about how she can't take him out in public because he's got tattoos. I mean, it's a total fucking Venus Uranus square story. Right. And it's like, and unless you're willing to kind of go all the way with it, it is sort of doomed to fail. Right. And I don't know how it resolved itself. I think she wound up eventually like cutting ties with this guy. I thought it was really interesting. That's a Venus Uranus square. You wind up in a strange way. You meet the person, like even in that, like technology, the computer, he's trying to open it up so she can go in and get his records and all this other stuff, which were vital for her finances. And she winds up, he was repairing more than the computer, apparently. So that's a Venus Uranus. So the relationships tend to be unusual, right? Now, if we look at this from the Tim Walz world, we'll call it Walz world. If we look at it from Walz world, he's got Venus squaring Saturn, squaring Uranus. So the Venus Saturn square is Tim. I will be a good boy. I will get married. I will do the right thing. Right. It's almost like an arranged marriage. And then Venus Uranus square is like Tim wants to be a bad boy. Right. Tim doesn't want that order. Right. So there's something with this typical square right here, this square right here, which in relationship causes him to be unbalanced. It's incredible tension. You throw in the Pluto square to Venus, and usually Pluto Venus squares, I think, are kind of interesting. It's till death do you part. I mean, really, it's till death do you part with the Venus Pluto square, and sometimes for the worse. Or till whatever, right? But I also feel like in a compromised situation, that Venus Pluto square is not good because with Pluto, we're talking about resources, right? We're talking about money. So if he is compromised, the Venus Pluto square, in my estimation, is not a good thing. Right. So I find this part of his chart very problematic. Now, that Venus is at 2 degrees, and that'll put it in Kamala Harris's 12th house. All right. So I think that's, now I do think that he does have some power. So where in Tim Walz's chart is the power? The Saturn sextile to Mercury. He could come off sounding like an authority. He's an older man, right? He probably sounds like your principal from high school. He's got the Jupiter Saturn sextile in his chart. And I think that's kind of an interesting sextile, right? Saturn's going to be order and Jupiter's going to expand on it. So he has the ability to appear sort of larger than life in an order sense. Like there's some authoritarian vibes with the Jupiter Saturn sextile, but they're not hardcore authoritarian. Like the authority. I'll call it the authority versus authoritarian. That's power. That's power. If you can lean into that with the sextile, that's power. People go, oh, well, this guy's got gravitas. We should listen to him. Right. So there's that. And then what else we have? The Mercury, same thing. Same thing. Well, we better listen to him. He's got gravitas. And I've heard him talk. And even when he's lying through his fucking teeth, right? And barely, he does the barely lie, the bear lie. He's kind of like a bear, right? He's a bear lie. Anyway, when he talks about being in Afghanistan, it sounds like he was in fucking Afghanistan. You know, what do they call them? The killing the sand people or whatever, the mud people, whatever they call them. They have a word for it. Sounds like he's there. No, he's not there doing that. He's there kind of overseeing everything. Right. He's got a clipboard, but he makes it sound like it though. Yeah, he's kind of like, doing inventories on soldiers, I think, in PTSD. But the way he says it, this is all like, the Mercury, Saturn sextile, the Jupiter, Saturn sextile. He makes it sound bigger than it is. So he's not necessarily lying, but he is telling kind of a tall tale, right? Kind of telling a little bit of a tall tale. Mercury, Jupiter conjunction. This is what happens with a Mercury, Jupiter conjunction. Stories get bigger. They get bigger. So he's got that. So people, oh yeah, wow. Yes. That's profound. And I've seen him. He comes across that way. If you didn't know him, you wouldn't know that he was, embellishing. He's making the story bigger. That's what happens with Jupiter. He's got a Mars moon sextile. When he is emotionally motivated by something, whatever that something is, that Mars will kick in and it will like do the bidding of the moon with that sextile, right? So if his moon is utopianistic or ideological, that Mars and Aries will kick in and say, doesn't matter. We're going to make it so. So in a chart, like that's not necessarily a bad thing. Moon Mars sextiles, right? In as much as Mercury squares the moon and sort of goes against the intuition in some ways, the Mars moon sextile is just like, okay, it's not about thinking though, right? Let's be clear about this. It is not about thinking. Mercury's about thinking. It's Mars moon sextile. It's like just, we're going to act, right? So did Tim Walz sit down with anybody when he was in Italy before he tapped out and said, hey, listen, I've got this thing and I'm going to, they want me to run for Congress back home. And I just want to, where are you guys with this? Right. I don't want to abandon the men. Right. Like, is there anything we could work out, so I can attend to this or, there was none of that. Right. That would have been what most soldiers would do. They're going to talk to they're higher up and, somewhere not too high up, but hey, listen, I got this thing. They want me to run for Congress back home. What are the stipulations here? And what do I need to do? Well, you can do this, that, or this and that. But, at the end of the day, if you decide to go back and do it and leave, these are the ramifications. And this is what's going to happen. And by the way, it's probably not going to bring you a whole lot of respect with those men. Does he do that? No, he doesn't do that. He just hands in his resignation. That's your Mars sextile to the moon, right? Oh, I'm gone. Right? I'm gone. I'm not going to deal with having to hash it out and talk through this. I'm just gone. Here's my resignation. I'm gone. I got to run for Congress. In the right situation, that's not bad. In the wrong situation, well, it's very self-serving. And I think it's really interesting because Aries is all, it's way connected to the military, like way connected. but it's also the self. Of all the signs, it is more self than any other sign, right? So Tim Walz was looking after himself. And that's where that Mars Moon sextile comes into play. The other thing too is I'm gonna kind of layer this, goes back to the family. The family was activists. When we say activists, during that time, we're talking people that are in the whole civil rights world, right? And probably to some degree, some form of socialist. I don't think that the two are hand in glove in the 1960s. And the parents are listening to Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie and Peter, Paul, and Mary, right? Maybe every now and then when they want to get real deep and spiritual, they'll throw on some Paul Robeson. And that's what he grows up with. I think Tim Walz is a red diaper baby. That's what I think. Like, that's the world he grew up in, right? And that's the world that he is ultimately trying to or going to represent on steroids. Jupiter, Pluto trine, Mercury, Pluto trine, Mercury, Uranus trine. Those are very powerful, right? The Mercury, Uranus trine allows him to think quick, right? He's like, fuck it. I'm not going to try to work this intuition or emotional body out. I'm just going to go with this Mercury, Uranus trine, Mercury, Pluto trine. Mercury, Pluto trines are very good at assessing who has money, power, and resources. Right? Money, power, and resources, especially with that Jupiter. I think the Jupiter trines coming in with Uranus. Jupiter and Uranus trines are interesting, right? There's kind of a strange, like a genius with a Jupiter Uranus trine. I think here it's a bit more problematic in some ways, or maybe it's more interesting. I don't know. But we're dealing with Uranus in Virgo, which is earth, and then Jupiter in Aries, which is fire, right? So I think that there's some interesting ability to improvise, right? But it's also maybe a little scorched earthy. Like things can get done, and things are, like there's outside the box thinking, I think, with a Jupiter Uranus trine. But again, because we're dealing with two very different sort of when I say axis, I'm talking about access points. Virgo being kind of more critical, conservative, right? And Aries just all about being, all in, right? So it's a kind of a weird trine in a lot of ways. It's not ineffective, right? Like I think that, okay. So I think you can see Tim Walz's rise. What happened? Oh, fuck. I think you can see Tim Walz's rise politically with that Jupiter Pluto trine. I'm sorry, Jupiter Uranus trine, and then Mercury Pluto trine. You can see it. That's what I see. Right? These are people that are helping him along the way and catching lucky breaks. Because a lot of times with Uranus Jupiter trine, things like are kind of lucky. He's never lost an election. All right. I'm not going to get into the asteroids. But I think that's a good basic fundamental breakdown on this chart. Right, let me see if I can bring in the China chart. This is the chart that really is the narrative right here. This is the narrative right here. China and Tim Walz are like a pig in a blanket. Well, Robert, where do you see that? China has the moon in Aquarius. Now, if Tim Walz is born around noon, that moon is going to be exact. It's exact enough, right? Like Tim Walz is very fucking connected to China. If anything, he should go live there. right? The moon is the home, right? Well, I can tell you right now, that guy feels more at home in China than he does the United States. Hands down. Moon, right? So what's the next best thing? Well, let's just turn the United States into China. Why not? Seems like a fine plan to me. That's Tim Walz, not me. All right. Where else are his greasy fingerprints all over this chart? Sun True Node conjunction. Hello. Like, this guy's going to find out who he is through China. And again, it does not matter like what time he's born. This is where the planets are lining up for China, right? So he has a very second house relationship with China. Money, 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 money. He is so freaking aligned with this country, right? Sun, conjunct true node, moon, right? China's an Aquarius rising. What else we got? Oh, his true node in Cancer, conjunct Uranus. Well, what have we just been saying about Uranus? Uranus is radical, right? Like Uranus is, if you want to break it down, Uranus is everything that we connect with the revolution, right? So it's radical. I'm sorry, it's radical. It could be the Trump revolution or the MAGA revolution. It's still radical. It's still radical because its job is to challenge and upend the status quo. And if you look at Trump Sun conjunction with Uranus, right, in 2016, he was challenging the status quo. All the Republicans, all the rhinos, right? That was a revolution. So it happens on both sides of the so-called, Mason-Dixon line or Maginot line or whatever you want to call it. That's the nature of Uranus. It's revolutionary. So he's got his true node right there, conjunct Uranus in China's chart. He's part of their revolutionary guard. Oh, look at Venus. His Venus in Gemini. Now, this is China's part of fortune, right? They're part of fortune, which is, that's going to be what, like maybe one Gemini? His Venus is in China's fourth house. He should be living there. I'm telling you right now. Whenever he would come back to Minnesota from China, I bet he hated it. Right? He hated it. Why? Because he is ideologically aligned with the people in China, whether it is the CCP, right? Whether it's the CCP or whether it's even the people themselves, he's aligned with them. If he comes back to the United States, he's not aligned. Why? Because in the United States, we are not CCP. We're many different things. There are people who come through. I'm just trying to think. Wasn't Jesse Ventura the governor of Minnesota? Was it Wisconsin or Minnesota with Ventura? He's gone weird too, hasn't he? Anyway, when he came back to the United States, he didn't like it. I can tell you that right now. This guy is like way into China, and China is way into him. Way into him. What else we got? Pluto, Uranus conjunct China, Saturn. 8th house, other people's money. Boom. Influence. Neptune on top of China's Venus. that's like a cloud, a fog bank hanging over Venus. Like you can't really see the relationship. But at the same time, I think it's quite idealistic. Now, other people, that are born around the same time as Tim Walz would have Neptune there, right? My Neptune isn't far off, but I'm not Tim Walz. And I don't have this other shit in my chart, which hooks me up in that way. Man, he is all up in China. Totally up in China. Okay. This guy is a Manchurian candidate. Literally, he's a Manchurian candidate. Now, this is an interesting question. Who do you think is going to run the White House if somehow Kamala Harris gets elected? It'll be Tim Walz, right? And don't think that Kamala will be opposed because, the West Coast mafia, Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, Barbara Boxer, they're all in bed with China. That's one of the reasons why Tim Walz was picked. It's because of his in-depth and more than likely compromised relationship with China. They're on the same page. Like, is Josh Shapiro going to be on the same page? No, he's not. He's not going to be on the same page. Josh Shapiro serves another master, and it's not China. It's not China. Right. So they're not going to pick him. And you could say, yeah, well, it's messy. He's got these ties to the IDF and Hamas and Israel, and they don't need the drag on their campaign. Well, that's true. They don't need the drag in their campaign, but Josh Shapiro does not have the same relationship with China that the California mafia does. Actually, it's really the San Francisco mafia, but it extends down into LA. Right. So this is one of the reasons why they picked him. And you just look at this thing, and it's like, my God, he is the Manchurian candidate. He's the Manchurian candidate. And who knows what kind of, screwdrivers and wrenches they've torqued this guy with. I think he's compromised. That's what I think. Beyond all of this, red diaper baby, I think he's compromised. And anybody in politics at a high level is pretty compromised, except for Thomas Massey. Okay, let's see what he's got. We go from the Manchurian candidate to what would I call his relationship with Kamala? The court eunuch, maybe. Now these two are, they're connected, right? They are connected. You get pea and pod energy with these two, for better. Now, and I don't like saying this, right? But his Jupiter is conjunct her moon, right? So what is he going to do? His energy is going to expand her kind of, lunar space, right? It is going to make her femininity bigger. Whatever you think of her, whoever you think is playing Kamala Harris, whether she's a dude or a tranny, It doesn't matter when it comes to astrology like this, right? Because whatever the public sees in that projection, that's what they're working off of, right? He's going to make her bigger. Like she is going to take that energy and expand her profile. Sorry, it's the way it is. They both have sun, moon, and Aries, which for a man and a woman, like that's a pretty good combination. If these two were getting married, may not be a bad marriage. He's the sun, she's the moon, right? But they're not. That said, and this is weird, astrologically, he would appear to be her presidential husband. You know what I'm saying? Right? Because you won't see like her and Doug. You'll see Kamala and Tim. And this is what people do because this is how we're wired. When we see couples like that in public, and I believe this will be more the case with those two versus Biden and Kamala, that people will automatically go into this place of memory that this is what a husband and wife looks like. They're going to be like husband and wife. Like that is the picture, that, generally speaking, that people have when there is a man and a woman together, right? Like that's the default. I'll give you an example. If they were together in Gibson's Hardware in the Hill Country, right? People would automatically assume that they were married. And that's here in Texas. They would. They would automatically assume, even though they look very different, they would automatically assume they were married. Because that's what happens when you get into the monad of coupling. So what we will be fed is this idea of the mother and the father, or the couple, the husband and the wife, but it's the mother who will be dominant in the relationship because his Jupiter is making her moon bigger, right? And it's like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. This is how the woman is the one who sets the tone for the family and the marriage. She's the matriarch, and the man is taking the back seat. Although he's right there with her, clearly she's the one who is making all the decisions. This is how people will see this, I guarantee you. It's not how you'll see it, but the people who are looking at them in a way that they are electable, that's how they will see them. Now, we know that Kamala likes and uses older men. So we have Saturn here on her midheaven, right? Which generally is like, it's the father, it's older men. Willie Brown, older man. Doug, older man. Joe Biden, older man. Now, her and Tim Walz are the same age, but he looks older than she is. Right? Tim Walz looks like he's like, I don't know. He's younger than me. Tim Walz is 4 years younger than me. Right? He just turned 60. He just turned 60. He fucking looks like he's 70. Am I right? Kamala turned 60 in October, but whether it's, the facials, right, or her mask, she tends to look younger than 60. Kamala, I say maybe looks 50, right? So you have this guy who looks older, and again, whatever it is she's doing to look younger, this woman looks younger than her purported age. Hello, Saturn, right? So he plays the role of Saturn. It's like another old guy or older looking guy who will help her advance her position, right? Yes. So they got they have a there, and you can see that the outer planets are kind of aligned, right? The Neptunes are kind of aligned. Um, Sun Moon opposition. She's born on a full moon, right? So he's got that Jupiter opposing her Sun that theoretically makes her bigger without overshadowing her. Chirons are in the same position. Venus in the 12th house. See, like there's a lot of mirroring going on in this chart because they're born around the same time. And again, if you're looking at the whole opposites thing, right? Like Linda Goodman once said that in male female relationships, opposites are okay, right? Opposites attract. In male male relationships, opposites are rivals. Oh, are you my rival? Look who's here. Look who's here. The Jasper man is here. There you go. Start talking about Mars and Aries. He comes on. You're a Taurus. You're good. How's it going, buddy? How's it going? Where's your girlfriend? She's over there, isn't she? It's good to see you. Astrologically, I'm going to say it, right? Like, this is a really, really good fit for Kamala Harris, candidate wise. It's a good fit. I don't like saying it, but, I'm an astrologer. Are there problematic things here? Yes. The one problematic piece is his moon, right? Which comes in and squares her Mercury, squares her sun, squares her own moon. Is it problematic enough to fuck things up? Maybe, possibly. But, Charlie said in the chat, right? Like the media doesn't dwell in dishonor. So anything that he's got that's secret and hidden with his moon in the eighth house, I just don't think it's going to be enough of a threat to potentially shipwreck that partnership. Now, Harris has a Mars Neptune square. She's very needy, right? Like it, the Mars Neptune. Oh, I froze. Thanks, Tom. All right, I'll be back. We're going 2 times a night now in the free zone. All right. Well, I'll be right back. Hold on. Okay, thanks for your patience. I got to get all my charts back up. Let me go to the one with Kamala and Tim. We'll finish this up, and then we'll move on to something else. Okay. So let's go into the share. And okay, so I mean, I think astrologically, this is a very good chart for these two people. And, I'm kind of sorry to break the news around, to be honest with you. But this is a chart where, how do I say this? And I know this sounds really bizarre, but Harris and Tim Walz are force multipliers in one another's chart, which is not good news for the Trump campaign. I'm just saying, astrologically, you're looking at force multiplication. It's all in here, right? I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's good for the country, but astrologically, this is a very connected chart. Very connected. Is there anything that could happen and derail that chart? The only thing I can think of is Pluto, right? And Pluto is moving away from Tim Walz's moon, which is at somewhere between 1 and 3. And it goes back into Capricorn. But once it does hit his moon again and goes direct, that could be problematic. And if that happens after, and it will happen after the election, there can be some significant blowback. Like there could be massive corruption that would be leaked, right? So let's just go with the transit. All right, so there's his moon. We're going somewhere between 1 and 3, right? And then Pluto is right there, just hanging out, retrograding, and then it comes back, hits that moon. What does it do? It squares her Mercury, right? And then by degree, it winds up squaring Jupiter and his Mercury, right? Because his Mercury is at what? 5. So that Pluto conjunction, which takes place in Harris's 8th house, other people's money. I think the 8th house is also very much connected to corruption. It's the underworld, right? It's the underworld. And when we think of corruption, we think of the underworld, we think of mafia, we think of these guys like, throwing elections, JFK, right? So there is a possibility that the transit of Pluto on Tim Walz's moon, which doesn't really happen until next year, could derail this partnership. But Pluto's like, moving away from that moon. And then they come in, right? And then it hits that. And I think that the whole thing can come tumbling down based on him and his relationship with her. But it won't happen until after the election. So that's the most powerful thing I can see in terms of Pluto, because it'll also square Harris's Mercury, right? And so there will be things that will come out around this. So if you're looking for, I don't know, the reverse silver lining, that would be the reverse silver lining right there. When Saturn moves into Aries, and then we have Neptune moving into Aries, Saturn gets on Tim Walz's Mars. I don't think that that's a very good transit for him, right? Because Mars in Aries just wants to act. And Saturn sits on top of Mars and says, no, you can't do that. So I think he's got some heavy transits coming, but not immediately. We've already gone through the sun opposing his moon, right? The other thing that we haven't talked about is that she named him vice president on a Mercury retrograde. I think that'll come back at some point to bite them. When is it going to be in the Mercury retrograde cycle? Right, Mercury goes retrograde, and it goes. Now, the other thing that we have to talk about is Mars and transiting Mars through the sign of Cancer and Leo. Right, it goes into Cancer, goes in Leo, goes retrograde. We got this Mars, Leo, Mars, Cancer, Leo Mars, Cancer, all the way through next year. Right. So that's pretty significant. And that does get into his Mars, right? It's Mars square. That'll be interesting. That'll be very interesting. Like, could he lose his temper? Yes, he could. Very much so. So that's the beginning of the Mars Cancer transit. And for those of you who are keeping score at home, I'll tell you when that is. Oh, let's go 2024. So what are you talking about? Mars, like what's his Mars? Like six Aries. What is it? Okay, I think it's 6 Aries. Okay, so we got Mars. Let's go with the 6 Cancer, and that's going to be all right. Keep your eye on Uncle Tim starting around the 15th of September. Keep your eye on Uncle Tim right around that time, 15th of September. That's when transiting Mars squares his natal Mars. He could blow his fucking stack. Right? He could definitely blow his stack. So if there's anything that could be problematic for him, it would be Mars. The other thing that could be problematic is transiting Chiron, which is at 22, and it doesn't go back to his sun, but it will eventually hit his Jupiter and Kamala's moon. And if they're in power during that time, that's a time when they would risk going to war. And that's a bit of a ways off because, Chiron does its retrograde stuff. And it does go all the way back to 19 and then it goes direct again. So that would be on top of their Jupiter moon conjunction in Chiron. And usually Chiron's all about risk, right? Yeah. And at that time, I think Saturn is also on his Mars, around his Mars. But I feel like this Mars square could really push him anger wise over the edge. All right. Why don't we do just a little chart of the moment, then we'll get out of here because I know for you East Coasters, it's kind of late. So let me just do this. We'll just see where we are. And I haven't done it, but I'm going to, I promise. Okay, let's do this. Oh, I got 2 Tim Waltzes. Okay. He reminds me of this actor. He was like a character actor in the 70s and the 80s. And if I ever see it, I'm going to do like a face thing. All right, we're almost there. All right. We're getting there. I have not frozen. Okay. Let's do a little screen share. There we go. on 1 second. A message. Okay. So this is where the energy's at, right? Mercury retrograde, 2 Virgo, transiting moon, Scorpio. So you're sleeping with it tonight. No wonder I had really intense. I had like hellish dreams. My 12th house is Scorpio. So the 12th house is the house of dreams. So I've got the moon in Scorpio going through my 12th house. I've always had very dark, hellish, intense, violent, death-like dreams. The rare occasions where there's some kind of breakthrough, right? It's like, whoa, look at that, right? But last night did not fail to disappoint. So the moon in Scorpio, you're going to bed with it, or at least some of you are. Most of you are. Some of you, you're in your day, or you will be. So we're starting off the week with the moon in Scorpio. And the thing I do like about it is the conjunction with Pallas, which means that everybody's instincts and intuition is finally honed, right? There's radar. Trust your instincts, especially as the moon gets closer, 19 degrees, 20 degrees, moves out of the inconjunct. Trust your instincts. Because Pallas in Scorpio, right? All Pallas's, pattern recognition, fluid, water sign, the psychic. Pallas in Scorpio, like, okay, we're having intuition, premonition, pattern recognition, and you better be prepared for what's coming, right? That's Pallas in Scorpio. And then the moon is coming, and there's this conjunction, and it's trining Saturn. And I'm thinking, be ready and get on your preps, right? This is like, which way is the wind blowing, right? And this I think this is very important. And even though it feels like, well, we had the moon in Scorpio there, last month, it was, yes, that's true, because the moon tends to be cyclical, of course, yes. And at the same time, right, it's coming in, it's trining Saturn, which is retrograding. And here we're dealing with the inconjunct, right? We've talked about the inconjunct earlier this night. We're going to close with the inconjunct. So Mars, Jupiter in Gemini is what, right? It is like electric. It's electric. It's restless. It's like, now. That is the voice, right? That is the sound of the alarm going off here on the other side of the moon in Scorpio. Pay attention. Pay attention. This thing with the plane that crashed in Brazil is quite interesting, although tragic. And how many people that were on board that plane that were like these high-level cancer researchers. They're going to a conference, and at the last minute, right, some of those people changed their flights. So the entire team didn't go down. The way that plane went down, it's fucking weird, right? You like you only see it out of the corner, at least the one that the video I saw. You see this, and it just looks like it's like spiraling, right? Could you imagine being on that fucking plane? And let's just say, for the sake of reality, that there were people on the plane, that it wasn't fake, right? Like, I think we become so inured with fake that, who was it? It was Richard Helms, the CIA. He said, when we get to a point where people don't believe anything, we've achieved our goal. Well, we're about like 5% away from that. because everybody believes everything is fake and nothing is real. Yeah, that's part of the program. So could you imagine being on that fucking plane and this thing is spinning like a top and you're going down? Oh, like what would be going through your head in that moment? Like it's like you just know you're going down. There's nothing you can fucking do. Right? You got somebody in the seat next to you and you're holding on to that person, right? Like in that moment, like they're your last point of contact. And maybe you're looking at each other's eyes and people are praying or crying or screaming, right? You know, all that shit is happening. And the best thing you could do is probably just let it go. It's like take a deep breath and get ready for the inevitable. So I think that it's kind of a sign in some ways. Kind of a sign. Gemini is all about travel too. And I think with Jupiter, you're really talking about the air. You know, it's expansive, right? It's not limited to just Elon Musk's cheap ass Cybertruck that Tucker's was his friend or some guy, buddy of his from uh, New Hampshire or Vermont or whatever. Yeah, I put a trailer on there, and I hauled a couple of. I had about four goats that I had to go take down the road to my friend Charlie's place, and it pulled it just fine, just fine. Yeah, yeah, that was not like whistling Dixie taking out the Cybertruck, literally taking out the Cybertruck. Very different. Anyway, um, yeah, it feels kind of weird and symbolic. You know, like the plane is going down and there's like nothing you can do about it, right? You kind of go there with it. Um, I'm choosing not to, right? But if that's the metaphor and we're it and it's going down and there's nothing you can do about it, take a breath, surrender, let the chips fall where they may, and let's hope you have prepared for that moment, right? So in that moment, those people on that plane, have they prepared for that moment? Well, how the fuck do you prepare for a moment like that? Well, you prepare for a moment like that by being re- you're reconciled with your life, right? Like you have this conversation. Well, if the lights went out tomorrow, would I be okay with who I am, what I've done, what I've achieved, what I've accomplished, what I've lived, how I've lived? And I think we all have to answer that question. And if you're not, then you need to figure out what you need to do in order to get there. And if you are, without it being fatalistic, right? With like, you know what? I'm pretty reconciled, right? That's the conversation that would have to happen in that person's head while they're like, they said, you know what? I had this conversation. I'm good. I'm good. Not everybody can say they're good. But in that moment, you'd have to replay that conversation in your head. You know, I'm good. I'm good. I'm taking a deep breath, and it may be difficult for the people I'm leaving behind, but I'm good. And I think that's a conversation we all need to have at some point. Now, when I ask myself that question, am I good? I would say not entirely. There are a few things that I feel somewhat incomplete with. And if I did them, would I feel more complete? Yes, I would. Absolutely. So I think that that's part of this, right? It's like the preparation moment, preparing for that moment. And so, preparation means a couple different things. There's physical preparation and there's psychological, emotional, spiritual preparation. That's part of the mix. What else we got? What's Mars doing? Mars getting real close to Jupiter. Real close to Jupiter. So that moon is coming in, right? That moon is coming in. Sagittarius, we're coming up in that T square this week, that grand cross, grand mutable cross. Yes, indeed, boys and girls, we most certainly are. Well, moon squaring Venus, moon squaring Saturn, moon opposing Mars. We talked about this last week. That's tricky. What do I feel when I think about that? It feels kind of like the hammer on kind of freedom of speech. Like it feels like an event that is like a hammer. And again, I don't know exactly what that event is, right? But it feel when you add it all up, Moon in Sagittarius wants to be authentic, wants to be honest, squaring Saturn and Saturn in Pisces, and it's like, no, no, right? And then you have the opposition with Mars, Jupiter, and it's almost like pressure, right? We're headed into a highly pressurized moment. So we're talking 12th through the 14th. We're 2 days. Starting tomorrow, 13th, highly pressurized moment. What do people do in a highly pressurized moment? They snap. And that's what it feels like. It feels like these mutable forces are coming in and creating a great deal of pressure because Venus and Virgo, kind of judgmental, critical, Saturn, Pisces, retrograde. Saturn's the father. We're dealing with judgment, right? There's judgment here. And then you have that kind of restless, Mars, Jupiter. What are we doing here? We're coming back into school season, aren't we? I wonder. Okay, so we talked about this before. We had this discussion last week. Pardon me if you've heard this one before, but it's the universities. It's the universities. It's what's going on in Israel. Right. Is there going to be the same kind of heat that went on towards the end of the spring, kind of bleeding? Is that going to kick back up again? I think it's possible. I think it's very possible. You're going to hear the hue and cry of anti-Semitism again, right? Something could happen, which is borderline or beyond the pale anti-Semitic, but is it really? And is the thing that happens actually the thing, right? Now, what's tricky is that when you get into that world, right, you're dealing with the Muslim factor, Iran, all these other places. Could they use that to accelerate something with Iran? Yes, they could. Could they have an event on a campus that's explosive? Yes, they could. Could it be pinned on Iran? Yes, it could. Could it be the start of an escalation? Yes, it could. If I had to boil it down, that's where I would go with this. Right? And again, what are people theoretically trying to do in these campuses? Free speech, boycott, divest, um, protest, right? That's what they're trying to do. So on the bingo card, the cosmic bingo card, that's where I'm throwing my dart. Something on campuses, coming back to school, protest, conflagration, psyop. That's where I'll go with it. Do I want it to happen? No, of course not. No, I don't want it to happen. But if I was looking at these aspects, that's where I would say it would happen. Because when you're dealing with Sagittarius, you're dealing about speech, right? Campuses are a home, the moon, away from home for students. That's what they are. The home away from home. Moon in Sagittarius. They're living on campus. Sagittarius, ninth house, higher learning. We're talking about foreign countries, Iran, Israel. They all fall into that Sagittarian territory. I'll tell you the other thing, people are sleeping on Ukraine right now. You know, Ukraine, probably with the help of the US, has pushed into part of Russia. I think they're going after one of Russia's nuclear reactors, if I'm not mistaken. I was forgetting the name of that country. I always want to say Moldova. It's not Moldova. It's the country that, for whatever reason, I fucking blank out on this country, and I shouldn't. But it's the country that didn't lock down. They've put troops on the border now. Right? They got troops on the border of Poland and, if I'm not mistaken, Ukraine. Right? So now this war is escalating. And people have not been paying attention to Ukraine. Right? We have the election, all the, fireworks and, pardon my pronunciation if I get a Sturm and Drang is happening in Israel and not Ukraine. Meanwhile, shit's going down in Ukraine. Right? They're kind of like back channeling this war now while all these other things are taking place. Anyway, so if I had to make a astrological evaluation and assessment, that's what it would be. It has something to do with another country, foreign country. And if we're talking about the aspect in general and not just apply to the United States, well, of course, right? It would apply to that country as well, including others. All right. Been here for 3 hours. I said we would do about an hour and a half or two. That's what happened last week. Why don't we shut her down? And I feel like I don't want to leave you in such a bad state. But that's out of our hands, right? It's out of our control. There's nothing, if that happens, there's nothing we can do about it. And anything that's a byproduct of the Grand Cross, there's nothing we can do about it. The only thing that we can do is hope that you've prepared. If you've prepared, then you're probably going to be better off than people that haven't prepared. Oh, look who's here now. Look who's here now. It's all peaches. The peaches. All right, I'm out of here. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for spending this time with me. I appreciate it. I hope you got something out of it. Don't forget our event in October. I think it's real. I think it's going to be an important event. I really do. I think it's going to be an important event. It's going to happen. And I think it's a really powerful way to harmonize, connect with people. And there may be people that you'll meet that'll be very important, right? to your life or your livelihood. So if you can make it, I kept the price down this year so more people could come. Link is in the show notes. You know what it's about. Hope you can make it. We always have a barbecue at my house afterwards. So if you're coming here, try to stay an extra day so we can hang out and have the barbecue, especially at the new house, which is a lot closer than the old house, which is great. Mods, thank you very much for your participation in chat, doing what you do. Chattoria, you're the best, hands down. You're all a bunch of freaks, and I love you because I'm a freak too. We're all freaks, but you're the best. And take care of yourselves, treat each other well, and God bless. Enjoy your night. Hope you have great dreams. And then we'll see you back here on Tuesday. All right. Bye for now.